In this lesson, we'll get started with color grading. Color grading is a vast subject, and to keep this tutorial concise, our focus will be limited to achieving a natural-looking video and making each shot look like it belongs with the others. I'm not going to walk you through correcting every shot, but we will work through a couple of examples, and you should be able to take care of the rest on your own. If you haven't done so already, click on the color page. One of the first things you might notice is that the timeline is gone, or at least radically different than on the edit page. The timeline is now represented in the center of the UI with the mini timeline and the clips timeline above it. For this lesson, we'll click on the timeline button at the top left of the UI to hide the mini timeline and make a little bit of room for our work. Along the bottom of the color page are a variety of extremely powerful color tools. There are a plethora of tools tucked away behind the various panels, tabs, and pages, but for this lesson we're going to focus on just a few of them. To the left are your color wheels. These allow you to target specific aspects of an image and adjust the color and brightness. In the middle is the curves palette, which allows you to adjust the color and contrast of your image through the use of a curve graph. The curves palette may be hidden if you're working on a smaller screen. To the lower right is the keyframe editor, which we won't be using in this tutorial. However, above each of these palettes is a toolbar, which allows you to change the contents of each palette. Click on the Scopes button above the keyframe editor to open the video scopes. If you're working on a smaller screen, or would otherwise like to reposition the scopes, you can click on this button to open the palette in a separate window. The video scopes are an essential diagnostic tool for color grading. The default parade scopes show you the brightness or luminance across the frame, as well as the brightness within each color channel. On the left of the scopes is a scale that shows color bit depth, and it ranges from 0 to 1023, with absolute white being at the top at the 1023 line, and absolute black being at the bottom at 0. The waveform then displays these values in the form of traces, and the traces are in roughly the same horizontal position in the frame as the pixel they represent. To ensure your work is as widely compatible as possible, click on this button to bring up the scope settings. Check the box to show reference levels, then change the low value to 64 and the high value to 940. Two thin gray lines should now appear. The line at 64 will be our new black level, and the line at 940 will be our new white level. In other words, only the items in the frame that are pure black or pure white should ever touch either of these lines. Now let's do some actual color correction. The first step is primary correction, which simply means getting the overall image to have the correct natural brightness, contrast, and color balance. Double-click on the first Marcello clip, and make sure you're at a frame where the lower third is not visible. We'll start with Marcello first, because the interview is the heart of the project, and because audiences will be most sensitive to other human beings having the correct appearance. Therefore, it only makes sense that we use the angle with a person in it as our baseline, and match all of our other shots to this. The camera that recorded this interview used a log profile, meaning that the brightest and darkest parts of the image are squeezed together to protect against under or overexposure during shooting. This feature is a great safety measure, but it does mean that you'll have to fix the image before delivery. Looking at the image, you can see that it's a bright, clear day, and there are some soft white clouds in the background. On a sunny day, those clouds should be close to the full 940 on our scopes, but right now they're way down around 640. There are a multitude of ways to correct this image in Resolve, but to keep things simple, I'll show you two. In the color wheels, click and hold the Gain Master ring beneath the Gain color wheel. Then, drag it to the right until the upper parade scope levels approach the gray line for 940. This should fall somewhere around 1.32 in the YRGB value fields below. This portion of the parade scope corresponds to the shaded trunks of the grapevines, which aren't truly black, so we don't need to go all the way to our gray line at 64. Drag the lift master ring to the left until the YRGB values read minus 0.01 or minus 0.02 to add just a touch more contrast. That's a little bit too contrasty, so we'll go to the gamma master ring and drag it to the right until it reads 0.04. That's better. The three wheels lift, gamma, and gain correspond roughly to the shadows, midtones, and highlights of the image. Each of these ranges overlap a little bit to create a natural-looking adjustment. While the exposure of the image is starting to look right, these clouds in the background have a yellowish tinge, giving a muddy look to the image. Let's see if we can clean that up a bit. In the color palette, below the color wheels, click on the number 2 to go to the second page of the adjustment controls. Then click and drag left in the temperature value field to cool the image off just a bit. Somewhere around -350 looks good to me. Now that we've got the image right, I'll show you another way. Click the Reset button in the Color Wheels palette to reset the corrections. Then I'll go to the Curves palette. If the Curves palette is hidden on your screen, click this button to reveal it. This end of the curve editor affects the brighter parts of the image. The middle affects the midtones, and the left side targets the darker parts of the image. Moving a point up brightens the pixels in that range of the image, whereas moving a point downward will make those pixels darker. I'll reset that. Click on the diagonal line about 2/3 of the way up the slope. Now drag it straight up. Once again, watch the parade scopes to make sure nothing goes past the 940 line. Now click near the bottom node to create another control point and pull it down very slightly, keeping an eye on the parade scopes and the image to make sure you don't make those shadows too dark. Let's boost the midtones just a hair by clicking between these 2 points on the curve and pulling up very slightly. If you need to delete a point, you can simply right-click on it. I'll undo that. Now you've used 2 different tools for correcting an image, but there are many, many more. Additionally, you can combine any of these tools. For example, we just fixed the contrast with the curves. However, we didn't affect the yellow tinge of the sky. To fix that, you can go down to the Color Wheels palette and adjust the temperature again. Or you can go to the Gain wheel and pull the control slightly towards teal to counteract the yellowish tinge in the clouds. With all of these different tools available, you should experiment to find which tools you're most comfortable using and which of them give you the best results. Now that we have the first Marcello clip where we want it, let's get the rest to match. If you have a mouse with a scroll wheel or a middle mouse button, this step is incredibly simple. Click once on the last clip of Marcello and make sure you can clearly see him in the frame. Then, middle-click on the clip that we already corrected. Resolve instantly copies the grade from the clip you selected. If your mouse doesn't have that functionality, it's still pretty simple. I'll undo that correction. With the last Marcello clip selected, I'll right-click on the corrected clip and choose Apply Grade. Resolve has now copied your work from one clip to the other. Now select one of the unfinished interview shots, then Command-click or Control-click the remaining shots, and apply the grade from one of the finished shots. The Apply Grade command works great here because all of these clips were shot from the same source at the same time. As a matter of fact, they're all from the same file. However, this may not work too well with different clips shot at different times. Double-click on the Read Slider shot. If you can't see the display names beneath the thumbnails, go to the View menu and make sure Show Display Names is still checked. Then, in the View menu, under Timeline Thumbnail Info, choose Display Names. Or, you can double-click in the Value field below each thumbnail until the display name appears. With the Read Slider shot selected, right-click on the first Marcello clip and choose Wipe Timeline Clip. This will allow you to compare both shots side by side. And you can use these buttons at the top of the viewer to adjust the comparison style. And you can adjust the wipe itself directly in the viewer. Now that we have a side-by-side view, attempt to apply the Marcello grade to the Read slider. As you can imagine, it wrecks the image. I'll undo that. This time, I'll right-click on the interview and choose Shot Match to this clip. This time, rather than copying and pasting grades, Resolve actually analyzes the interview clip and tried to match the Read slider clip to it. As you can see, it did a pretty decent job, but we may still want to do a little bit of fine-tuning manually. Automatic shot settings like these are hit or miss and aren't intended to be a one-click fix, but rather the purpose of these tools is to get you to a better starting point so that you can finish the correction more quickly. In most cases, it's worth your time to at least try them first. If it works, you've saved yourself a bit of time, and if you don't like the results, you can simply undo them. In the next lesson, I'll show you how to output your movie using the Deliver page.